Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
In high school, I was diagnosed with ADD, which is a reward they give to the coolest kids in school. When I was taking the test to get diagnosed, I had a really cool doctor. And for the test, he showed me a photo of a room. He's like, I want you to identify all the objects in this room. So I'm like, okay, that's a door, that's a window, that's a doorknob. I forgot what a windowsill was. He's like, what's that? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, that's a windowsill. I was like, oh. I was like, what does this mean? He's like, well, you definitely have ADD. I was like, sweet. He's like, you're relieved? I'm like, yeah, for a second, I just thought I was a dumbass. He's like, no, that's a disease. I was like, oh, fantastic. So I called my brother, I'm like, hey, Mark, you know, you called me an idiot all these years? Turns out it's a condition, okay? So how about some sensitivity? My dad's like, why'd you fail trigonometry? I'm like, because I have a disease, Dad. It's called ADD. I'm f***ed in the head. You think I want to be playing video games all day? No. I want to be in the library with the nerds. If I can't, I have to do drugs with the cool kids. It's a symptom. People don't respect mental illness in this country.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Apollo Wednesday, March the 12th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the headlines, patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and Apollo. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
In a country town, the neighbors say, lay happily there all day long, until one day he told that he must go away, She wanted that what could be wrong. You say you know it's true, I love you best of all. And yeah, it's better wish you part. Just as you went away, they heard this way to say, though it must broken heart. Some of these days, you gonna miss me, honey. Some of these days, you gonna feel so lonely. You'll miss my hugging. You'll miss my kissing. You'll miss me, honey, when you go. Just for you only, for you now, honey, I let you have away. And when you leave me, you know I will grieve.
Thank you. And now the headlines for Wednesday, March the 12th. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass facing recall effort. Storm timeline. When will the heavy rain, mountain snow hit Southern California? Evac orders, warnings issued in L.A. burn scar areas ahead of storms. Man last seen with missing Pitt student named person of interest. Newsom reveals when Menendez brothers will appear before parole board. More than 100 crows shot to death by unknown suspect in Westchester. Jay-Z's attorney speaks out about investigation into allegations. Scott Peterson recovering from injuries suffered in prison attack. And those were the headlines for Wednesday, March the 12th. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the political corner.
And just like that, Canada folded. You gotta know when to hold up. Hold on. Know when to fold. Y'all know the song? Come on, Canada. Y'all playing around. Trump is a B-O-S-S. 2 hours later. I just made that TikTok 4 hours ago. Canada heard Donald Trump wasn't playing around. They said, you right. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take that tariff back. I'm sorry. Oh, you remember that deal that Donald Trump proposed? Ceasefire. There's a ceasefire in Ukraine. Thanks to who? Up like Donald Trump. Let me hear you say the nigga name. The president. I gotta work on it. It's a little dry. My fault. I need some water. America, that is how a president operates. When a president speaks, some shit happens. In the last 24 hours, Donald Trump has done more than I've ever heard Biden has done in 4 years. All I know is Donald Trump is putting in work. That's what I know. USA, dub.
And that was the political corner. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the patriotic short. And that was the patriotic short. Back in a minute. Thank you very much. And now, a little bit of motivation.
Many dreams die while suffering. I'm talking about emotionally, spiritually. It could be a relationship. When you're suffering, you give up on the very things that you wanted the most.
Life is going to beat you upside your head. Before you blow up, life will strip you to the core.
What makes you get up when you fall down? What makes your mentality change if there's a great situation or there's a bad situation? How do you dictate that based on the level of pain?
I need you to evaluate yourself and ask yourself the question, how are you wired? When you have a trial or a tribulation, how are you wired? Does it break you? Your problem is your pain has identified you. Your pain has destroyed you.
All of us will hit the wall. That wall shocked some people. That wall knocked the life out of some people. It didn't work out for them. They hit the wall and they turned around. But there's some small number. They decide, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be over there. This kind of person refuses to be denied.
I'm wired differently. I get excited about no. I love no. I love it. It turns me on. No, Eric, I'll be back. I'll be stronger when I come back.
This person doesn't care about the pain because this person knows something. There's no gain without pain. So this person comes back anyhow, again and again. And if you keep on hitting that wall, here's what happens to you. You will have an incredible breakthrough. And it's as if the universe says, let's help him out. I admire that kind of tenacity. Let's give her a hand. Let's send her assistance, send her resources. It will come out of nowhere. As you're working times with tears falling down your face, and you'll look back on the times and you will cherish those times.
When your mind knows it's not going to quit, your body will adapt to whatever is in front of it.
What happens is you have all these voices that are telling you you're f***ed up and this is going to be hard. But for some reason, you put so much practice into you that you can ignore every one of them that are telling you you're not going to f***ing make it and still be able to f***ing make it. Because you have put the practice in that you know this is the process. It's such a daunting task that all the voices are saying no. But you still have the conviction that I know I can do this.
When you get knocked down, and you're going to get knocked down, when you run into some roadblocks and you're going to run into them, but you can always be able to bring yourself back in, knowing if someone has done it, it's possible that I can do it.
Some of you have been knocked out by life, and you got up and saw the blood. He hit me. Sometimes in life, you have to hit back. You got knocked on the ground. You had absolutely nothing to do with that, and I'm not blaming you for that. But if I come back a week later, you still on the ground. If I come back a year later, you still on the ground, that's your fault. If you get knocked down, there's nothing you can do about it. But getting back up has every single thing to do with you. And you will promise me that from this day forward, you will not be defeated. I just love myself enough not to be trapped in the same doggone spot for the rest of my life. I love myself too much. So what makes E.T. different than everybody else? Every year I just kept going. And I kept going. And I kept going. And I kept saying one day gonna be my day. But you know what I'm not gonna do? I'm not gonna quit in the process. I'm not gonna give up. I'm not gonna give in. And the problem with you, you've not recycled your pain. You're still living on talent. And I challenge you. Average people live on talents. Phenomenal people live off efforts. Recycle your pain. Get something from it. You're already in pain. Use it. Do something with it. Allow it to take you to the next level. Allow your pain to push you to greatness.
Success isn't a straight line. It's a maze. And when you think you figure that maze out, you hit a wall. And you got to turn around and start again. Everybody's got a fucking plan so they can get in the fucking mouth. So when your plan fails, when you get knocked down on the fucking canvas, when everything falls apart in your life and your plan is fucked up, what the fuck are you going to do? There's only one motherfucking option. Stay fucking hard.
And I'm not here because I'm the best. I'm here because they tried to break me and they couldn't. Oh, I'm wired differently. I didn't start crying. I didn't say, why me? I'm doing good to the world. I'm not hurting anybody. Why me? I'm wired differently. I can. I will. I must. We turn tragedy into triumph. That's what lions do. It does not make a difference what the circumstance is. Lions don't cry. Lions don't give up. Lions don't quit. Lions hunt. That's what we do for a living. So do me a favor. From this point forward, execution is worship. I don't make the big bucks because I talk. I make the big bucks because I execute.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, some Shiv Kailash.
happy belated Mahashivratri to everyone. This one's for Shiva.
And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Stoic.
What's on your tombstone? When you see someone often flashing their rank or position, or someone whose name is often bandied about in public, don't be envious. Such things are bought at the expense of life. Some die on the first rungs of the ladder of success, others before they can reach the top. And the few that make it to the top of their ambition through 1,000 indignities realize at the end it's only for an inscription on their gravestone. Seneca, on the brevity of life, 20. Sometimes our professional commitments can become an end unto themselves. A politician might justify the neglect of his family for his office. Or a writer might believe her genius excuses antisocial or selfish behavior. Anyone with some perspective can see that, in fact, the politician is really just in love with fame, and the writer enjoys being condescending and feeling superior. Workaholics always make excuses for their selfishness. While these attitudes can lead to impressive accomplishments, their cost is rarely justified. The ability to work hard and long is admirable, but you are a human being, not a human doing. Seneca points out that we're not animals. Is it really so pleasant to die in harness? He asked. Alexander Solzhenitsyn put it better. Work is what horses die of. Everybody should know that.
And that was the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. And now, His Excellency, Bishop Robert Barron.
It is simply impossible to categorize Catholic social teaching according to our clunky categories of left and right. Is Catholic social teaching liberal? Is it conservative? Is it more like the Democrats, more like the Republicans? Look, what's mentioned explicitly: great concern about the plight of migrants, great concern about the curse of war, great concern about the situation of those living in poverty, great concern about violence against women. Okay, those are at least in the standard reading, kind of left-wing preoccupations. And at the same time, violations of human dignity include abortion, they include euthanasia, and indeed gender ideology, sex change, etc. All things that preoccupy the right. So is this left? Is it center? Is it right? None of it. None of it. Catholic social teaching beautifully transcends this split. And there's a lot of reasons for that and where this split came from. But Catholic social teaching, it's its glory, I think. It's its pride and joy that it transcends these easy political divides.
And that was His Excellency, Bishop Robert Barron. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, "Let those who do care about the future, those willing to crusade for a perfect society, realize that the new radicals are the fighters for capitalism." Unquote. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter For the New Intellectual, from the book For the New Intellectual. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little something about the Department of Education. In the news, they've reported that there's going to be a 50% reduction in staff at the Department of Education, and that the whole idea of, or the aim or goal of the Trump administration is to get rid of the Department of Education. So my thoughts on this are, I don't think we're going to miss it. I don't think 5 minutes after it's gone, I don't think anybody's going to say, gee, whatever happened to the Department of Education? I've never, ever heard anybody praise the Department of Education, nor have I heard them excessively criticize. I've never heard somebody say, thank God for the Department of Education, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten my high school diploma, right? Or bachelor's degree, or even thank God for the Department of Education, otherwise I wouldn't have become president of the United States. Neither do I ever hear somebody say, you know what, I failed my algebra midterm because of the Department of Education. Never hear that either. So to me, it means that they're really not doing much of anything. And again, I think that if the Congress does get around to actually doing away with the Department of Education, I don't think it'll be missed. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Stuart with Maria first, of course.
Spoke with Mickey Bowman and gave her the news. We wanted to get that out to you ASAP. Breaking news this morning. Let's send it right over to Varney and Company. Picks it up. Stu, take it away.
Always on top of it, Maria. So well done. And good morning to you. Good morning, everyone. Head-spinning developments on tariffs, the Trump revolution, and inflation. There's news every which way you turn. There's nothing boring about the Trump era, is there? We'll start with the Consumer Price Index, released about a half hour ago. In February, the index up 0.2%. Now, that's less than expected. In the last 12 months, consumer prices went up 2.8%, down on a yearly basis from the month before. That means inflation ticked down. Here's the market reaction. Investors clearly like it. Plenty of green on your screen. The Dow up maybe 300 points pre-market. Same with the Nasdaq, up just over 300 points. Interest rates following that inflation report, no major shift, although the 10-year Treasury has moved above the 4.3% level. As for the 2-year, still firmly right at 4%. So yields moving up a little on Treasuries following that inflation report. Next, tariffs. As of now, any steel or aluminum coming into this country will be slapped with a 25% tariff. The EU has retaliated with tariffs slapped on American products going to Europe. Tuesday, President Trump won a trade fight with Canada. Ontario's premier threatened to cut off electricity supplies. Trump said, "You do that, and my retaliation will go down in the history books." Ontario backed off. The premier said how much he loves Americans. In a few minutes, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick will be joining us. He's the point man on tariffs with Canada. Next, the Trump revolution. It is happening fast. Today, half the staff of the Education Department have been let go. The president wants the entire department abolished. And say goodbye to environmental justice. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin is closing all environmental justice offices. Politics, a win for President Trump. House Republicans stuck together and passed a 6-month government funding bill. That prevents a government shutdown. After a chat with the president, the Freedom Caucus voted yes. There was only one no-voting Republican, Thomas Massey, who says it doesn't cut spending enough. Trump is threatening to primary him. On the show today, Ukraine agrees to a 30-day ceasefire. Secretary of State Rubio says the ball is now in Russia's court. And we're talking with tariff tough guy Howard Lutnick moments from now. Wednesday, March 12th, 2025.
And that was Maria and Stu. Back in a minute. Thank you. A little bit more law and order. This time, though, the district attorney actually gets it right.
He actually said that.
Did the girl know what she did was wrong, Liz?
In some sort of abstract way, yeah.
So you'll testify that she was legally sane at the time of the murder?
Yes.
But?
You've been in front of enough juries, Jack. I've got to tell you, a mother killing her own baby without any motive whatsoever, it makes you wonder.
Do I have to explain the law to you, Claire? Crazy is not the same as legally insane.
Jack, I'm just saying that what Leah Coleman did is incomprehensible to me. The jury's got to feel the same way. If she isn't sick, who is?
Then what are we doing here?
Jack.
No, Claire. Substitute psychology for morality and our jobs become obsolete.
But Jack, this is an extreme case. A jury is going to want to know why she did what she did.
Maybe she was just downright bad.
You actually believe that?
With all due respect for your profession, Liz, I think it's been overplayed in the courtroom.
So people are just good or bad, period?
It's better than healthy or sick.
There we go. He's absolutely right. The left in this country for a long time has wanted everybody to understand. You don't understand. You don't understand. And the problem with understanding is that it kills outrage. One of the things that people are asking today is, how come nobody is outraged? How come nobody is upset about some of the things that are going on? And it's because we've been brainwashed into, quote, understanding. And what they're doing here, again, is the same idea. Just because a psychologist says doesn't mean we actually understand. It could be very well that she is, as the district attorney said, just bad, a bad person. Everything has to be understood. We've got to know why everything is done by everybody. No, we don't. The only thing we truly need to understand is morals. Once we understand the difference between right and wrong, we're all set. The rest of it is about punishment, and that's where you can get into more details and things become a little bit more complicated. When you're dealing with right and wrong, it's simple. When you're dealing with justice, what is it that this woman, in this particular episode, it's a woman who killed her child, what does the woman deserve? That's when you get into issues of sane or insane. Does she deserve to go to prison, or does she deserve to go to a mental institution? But that's the penalty phase. In the initial phase of guilt and innocence, it doesn't matter. All that matters is right and wrong. Did she do what was right, or did she do what was wrong? Back in a minute. Thank you. Law and Order, the gift that keeps on giving.
Detective Briscoe signed the evidence sheet.
Were the blood swatches from the crime scene kept in your lab under lock and key 24 hours a day?
No, not when someone's there working.
Then is it possible Detective Briscoe could have had access to the blood swatches from the crime scene before you performed the RFLP test?
Anything's possible.
There we go. That's the error that Nancy Pelosi wants us to make. She wants us to believe that anything is possible. If anything is possible, then socialism. The fact of the matter is nothing is possible until it's proven to be so. And it's proven to be so when we can look into the past and or the present and find a match. So in this particular case, has Sergeant Briscoe ever taken samples in the past? No. Did he take any samples or any evidence he took samples now? No. Then it's not possible. Okay, because the idea that anything is possible is on its face absurd. Nobody can flap their arms and fly away. So don't let somebody pull that kind of crap on you. I don't. If somebody ever comes to me and says, well, isn't it possible? My answer always is no. It's impossible. Now this puts them in the position of having the burden of proof. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from an article in the American Thinker. When our government removes social media posts that differ from government policy or suppresses speech by arbitrarily deeming it hate speech, we begin to look quite like Orwell's fictional Oceania. But that's just a start. All kinds of behavior and thought are being restricted, manipulated, or banned through the left's term of engagement. That is, the language they use. Just take a look at a small subset of intentionally manipulative words and metaphors here. Undocumented migrants hides that these people are here illegally and implies that they're entitled to equality with legal citizens, devaluing the importance of and responsibilities of citizenship. Unhoused person homogenizes the causes of homelessness, which are mostly antisocial behaviors, drug addiction, criminality, unaddressed mental illnesses caused or exacerbated by drugs, and implies that the fault is society's, requiring ever more government money and control. Trans women, the normalization of deviancy instead of the truth of a mentally ill man. Fair share, the pretense that people who have acquired wealth, usually via hard work or exceptionally innovation, owe it to everyone else. Entitlements, another Democrat construct, as if God himself guarantees someone the right to your money. Dreamers, take an illegal alien, give birth or walk a child across the border, and voila, you produce a dreamer. Fake news, life is like a TV. If you don't like the show, change the channel. TV and life have merged into highly produced news curated for particular audiences. Facts be damned. Death of democracy. In his farewell address, George Washington cautioned against the divisive influence of political parties, asserting that they could lead to the subversion of the power of the people. We're still standing, notwithstanding all those that parrot this tired lie. And let's see here. A common thread runs through all the attempts to control speech, de facto control of your freedom of choice. How patently absurd for someone else to insist you use their language, phrases, and false metaphors. The epitome of hubris is the assumption that what someone else manifests out of thin air should become the law of the land, if not in fact, then in practice. Is what is happening today a fad? Fads usually don't last. The correct and proper usage of words and phrases is not trivial. Trump implicitly agrees that he has commenced the Herculean task of undoing the massive societal and economic damage wrought. Simply insisting that there are only two sexes is a blow at the very heart of the Democrat effort to forcibly replace facts with fantasies. His stalwart support for Israel, a historic nation, and a free pluralist society is also a blow against the enforced fantasy that Gaza, a military-controlled stretch of land in which Jews are executed and Christians banned, is an actual nation entitled to respect and a right to ownership of land from the river to the sea, a phrase that erases Israel entirely. The very nature of words and phrases is the sly and insidious way that progressives intentionally enacted the slow and progressive destruction of our culture and, tellingly, that of Western culture everywhere. Mark Twain once said, "The reports of my death are greatly exaggerated." Let me substitute, the reports of the death of Western culture are greatly exaggerated. I sure hope I'm right. And that, let's see, author, businessman, thinker, and strategist. Read more about Alan, his background, and his ideas to create a better tomorrow at his website. But this is an article in the American Thinker called "Through Leftist Speech Control, America's Terms of Engagement Have Changed." Now, the thing that he misses here, and this is Alan Pfeffer. So what he's missing here is, how does the left manage to do this? Because it's not just the left that's doing this. If it was only MSNBC that referred to people as migrants, nobody would care. It'd be, so what? If CNN and MSNBC, but it's not. If you listen to Fox News, they're doing the same thing. OANN is doing the same thing. Newsmax is doing the same thing. They're using all of the left-wing propaganda. Why? Because of something called the Manual of Style. And there is actually several manuals of style. One of them is called the Chicago Manual of Style. And the Chicago Manual of Style tells people, journalists and news reporters, what phrases and words that they should use. If you don't use those words and phrases, you face the possibility of being drummed out of the news business. That you will not be considered a serious journalist, and therefore you will not be invited to press conferences. And that can be lethal for a news department. If you're not able to go out and collect the news, what good are you? So, but still, even that being the case, Sean Hannity and people like him need to push back and quit referring to people and events in ways they know are false. Quit calling them migrants. Quit calling them the unhoused or homeless. The true homeless people, by the way, are the ones in Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon, Altadena, California, who were burned out of their homes. Those people are truly homeless. The other people are just squatters, trespassers, and the like. But that's how they exert control, through the manual of style. But if we had anybody on the right, real conservatives that had any balls, they would push back on the manual of style and ignore it and continue to call things what they are. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Chapter 12 and Chapter 12, Part 1 of Apollo.
Chapter 12. Hey, it isn't that complicated. I went to Houston in November '63, Shea recalled, and we'd made the decision to go to the moon LOR in November '62, and there was still no design for a command and service module compatible with lunar orbit rendezvous. No design. I found it hard to understand. And so Shea began to see firsthand what came to be the closest thing to an out-and-out scandal in the Apollo program, the origins and first years of North America's contract to build the spacecraft. 1. When awarding large contracts, the federal government uses a standard procedure. First, it publishes a Request for Proposals, RFP, in which it describes the work to be done and names a time and date by which proposals for this work must be received. Companies that wish to bid submit proposals by that date. The government evaluates the proposals. The contract is awarded to the proposal scoring highest on a prearranged formula that weighs the technical approach, the personnel the bidder will use, and the bidder's corporate expertise. At the time the RFP for the Apollo Command and Service Module, CSM, was distributed in late July 1961, North American Aviation was one of the leading aerospace companies in the United States. It boasted an especially strong record on military and experimental aircraft. North American had designed and produced both the F-100 and F-86, and more recently had built the experimental X-15, which in its initial flights was proving to be a surpassingly fine aircraft. The man who had managed the X-15 and who ran North American's other space-related projects was Harrison Storms, known universally as Stormy, a nickname his friends thought to be descriptive of the man. Storms was not enthusiastic about bidding for the CSM. North American had a grab bag of subcontracts on the Mercury and Gemini programs and was frontrunner to win the contract for the second stage of the Saturn, a contract which was in fact awarded to North American in early September. It is an understood thing in the government contracting world that the goodies are spread around, and it seemed to Storms that the task of winning the CSM contract as well was pretty much impossible. But he figured that since we were training these people to be a space division, and since we needed the exercise and we could always go subcontractor, then it was a very worthwhile exercise for us to go through the motions of bidding, Storms said later. So, we went ahead and bid. 5 companies submitted proposals: Convair, General Dynamics, Martin, McDonnell, and North American. On October 9th, NASA's Source Evaluation Board, heavily loaded with Space Task Group people, met at the Chamberlain Hotel at Old Point Comfort near Langley. Tom Markley was secretary for the subcommittee evaluating administrative capacity. His subcommittee rated Convair first, Martin second, and North American last. A few days after his subcommittee had finished its work, he got a call from Bob Pyland. "The scores on your management subcommittee look a little skewed," Pyland told him. "We'd like to have you evaluate some other criteria in addition to what you guys evaluated already." This seemed a little odd to Markley. Why hadn't they thought of these other criteria beforehand? Well, he was told, the Source Evaluation Board thought it ought to give a little more weight to the bidder's experience in producing experimental aircraft. The other subcommittees got similar instructions. Rescore the proposals, giving more weight to experience with experimental aircraft. And so everybody did. The result of the rescoring helped North American considerably, since the leading example of an experimental aircraft was the X-15. North American was still ranked 5th on the business criteria. It was ranked 5th on technical approach. But in technical qualification, it had risen to 1st by a thin margin over Martin. Overall, the summary score put Martin 1st, with Convair and North American tied for 2nd. The Source Evaluation Board was unequivocal when it turned in its recommendation. The Martin Company is considered the outstanding source for the Apollo prime contractor, it wrote in its report to Webb. The rescoring wasn't the only funny thing that had been happening with the CSM contract. One Space Task Group engineer was assigned to a review panel along with astronaut Al Shepard. During the panel meetings, Shepard was openly contemptuous of the rigmarole they were being asked to go through. "This is all a waste of time," he kept saying. "It doesn't make any difference what the score is. North American is going to win." Another man who had been with the Space Task Group for about 2 weeks remembered walking to lunch during the oral presentations, before North American had even given its pitch, and hearing another astronaut, Gus Grissom, say to his companions, "By God, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure North American gets this contract." The man was shocked. What kind of outfit am I in anyway? He asked himself. Others recall the ways in which, in those years, North American seemed to act as if it had the government in its pocket. One senior NASA official remembered being present in Brainerd Holmes's office when Holmes told a senior executive from North American that he would not be permitted to bid on the lunar module because of North American's backlog of work. The executive is supposed to have said explicitly, "If you don't let me bid, I'll have your job," which seemed to the observer to be a strange thing for a corporation executive to think he could say to an official of the government. Then there were curious coincidences involving Bobby Baker, still operating under the unofficial patronage of Lyndon Johnson and retained as North American's Washington lobbyist, and the powerful Senator Robert Kerr of Oklahoma. Baker had begun a company, Servue, with the help of a bank closely connected to Kerr. Servue then got a big contract to place vending machines in the North American plants. Shortly after being awarded the CSM contract, North American moved a large part of the Apollo work to a plant in Tulsa. No one ever proved that anything shady had gone on, but the coincidences were noted and the rumors persisted. After finishing his work with the subcommittee, Tom Markley was offered the job of resident manager at the CSM contractor's plant. He would be resident for ASPO, hence RASPO. Markley agreed, and since he knew that the board had recommended the Martin Company, Markley went to Baltimore, where Martin had its main plant, to start looking for a house. In a few days, Markley got another call from Pyland, who now asked Tom whether he would be willing to take the RASPO job if the place turned out to be a warmer climate. Markley was perplexed. "There's no place in Florida they're going to build this," he said. "What about Southern California?" Pyland asked. "Bob, General Dynamics doesn't have a chance," Markley said, "and there's no one else in California who could win this thing." "Well, I just wanted to know your opinion," said Pyland. "What if it is California?" Markley finally got the drift. He paused, and then he told Pyland that in that case he didn't think he wanted to go. He just wouldn't be able to start off with the right attitude. Webb had set aside the recommendation of the Source Evaluation Board and given the CSM contract to North American. But he had done so not at the behest of North American's powerful political allies. Rather, he had followed the advice of Bob Gilruth, George Lowe, and Walt Williams. Piecing together various accounts, it seems to have happened more or less like this. After the evaluation board had finished briefing Webb on its assessment, Webb took Siemens and Dryden into his office to talk. Probably Brainerd Holmes was called in too. Then, after a while, Webb called in Gilruth, Williams, and Lowe, and asked them whether there were any factors other than those presented by the evaluation board that he should take into account. Gilruth and Williams promptly said that they felt North American was more qualified than Martin, and Lowe indicated that he agreed. Therein lies the complication that keeps this from being a simple story of favoritism and possible corruption. A lot of people within NASA wanted North American to win because they thought North American would do the best job. George Low said later that when they saw the Source Evaluation Board's report recommending Martin, we didn't believe it. He and the others told Webb and Siemens to think of this spacecraft as an outgrowth of more conventional flying machines. They worried that Martin could not do what North American had already proved it could do with planes like the F-86, the F-100, the B-70, and the X-15. The X-15, the closest analog to the command and service module in an aircraft, loomed especially large. It flew like a bird. It was more or less within cost, within plan, on time, Catwell Johnson would say later. They weren't just talking about it, they had done it, and there it was. That sort of thing meant a lot to the old NACA hands who, above all, were persuaded by evidence that someone could make a fine flying machine. Webb listened carefully to all these arguments. By this time, it was late Friday evening. He said he wanted to sleep on it over the weekend. Monday morning, he told them his decision. North American won the contract, and with it, trials and tribulations that would not fully end until 1968. The tensions between NASA and North American began the night of the award when someone at North American made up some baseball caps with NASA embroidered on the front with the S replaced by a $sign. That infuriated a number of NASA engineers. The moon program was not supposed to be business as usual. There was also the problem of staffing. North American was already strained to the limit with its new contract for the Saturn S2 stage. Simultaneously, North American was involved in trying to develop the paraglider that, it was then thought, would be used for the Gemini capsule's landing system. So during the early months of the award, North American's Apollo spacecraft team was often understaffed and studded with inexperienced people. Time would not soften Joe Shea's judgment about the situation he found when he went to ASPO in Houston 2 years after North American began work. I do not have a high opinion of North American and their motives in the early days, he said many years later. I think they were more interested in the financial aspects of the program than in the technical content of the program. I think Storms was a very bad general manager. I think Atwood, North American's president, had $signs in his eyes. Their first program manager was a first-class jerk. There were spots of good guys, but it was just an ineffective organization. They had no discipline, no concept of change control. If anything, they were interested in pumping the program up rather than in what the program really was. Shea was not alone in his opinion. During the first years of the CSM contract, North American acquired a very bad reputation around NASA. It wasn't all North American's fault. The Apollo spacecraft was a completely new machine and more complex than any aircraft ever built. The Mercury capsule had been much simpler, yet McDonnell Aircraft Company had run into the same kinds of problems that North American was stumbling over now. For its first year, many at NASA had thought McDonnell was a money-grubbing, incompetent contractor that was shipping half-finished, misbegotten capsules to the Cape, where they had to be rebuilt from scratch. By the time McDonnell was making Gemini capsules, it had gotten so good at its job that the Geminis routinely arrived at the Cape in launch-ready condition, and McDonnell had, in NASA's eyes, become a paragon of corporate virtue. Nor should it be forgotten that many of the NASA people who were managing the hardware contracts had come out of Langley. When Sam Phillips came to the Apollo program at the end of 1963, at the same time Shea went to Houston, he was startled to find such a complete contrast between a tremendous technical capability and a very, very thin capability to manage a large-scale program activity. And this was nowhere truer than at Houston. No one had learned how to manage contracts at Langley because there weren't any. The men of the old Space Task Group were engineers in bone and spirit, and suddenly they had become managers by decree. Some of them became good managers, but it took them a while. Many never were comfortable in that role. Was there ever a less plausible manager than Cadwell Johnson, without a shred of diplomacy, a loner, a natural designer who, by his own admission, lost interest in his designs once they were pretty well patted into shape? Yet when Shea arrived to take over ASPO, there was Johnson managing NASA's CSM contract with North American, poring over work schedules and time charges and management systems. Shea shifted him back to a design job forthwith. Lee Atwood thought that much of the criticism of North American was really part of an inevitable charade to which contractors must reconcile themselves. The contractor is always the underdog when something comes up, he said later. He has to absorb the criticism. NASA's technical people love to think they invent things. That's kind of a handicap for the contractor's technical people because they are being second-guessed by a large gathering of technical people in NASA. If the work goes wrong, the contractor is wrong. If it goes right, the NASA technical man gets his medal or whatever. But however the blame is parceled out, the fact remains that the first years of North American's effort to build the command and service module were rife with wasted effort, lack of coordination, and intermittent warfare between contractor and customer.
And that was Apollo by Charles Murray and Catherine Bly Cox. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.